It has been a bumpy ride for the aviation sector globally since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, with recovery largely pegged on the effectiveness of the pandemic management and vaccines rollout. What does 2022 hold for the sector, particularly in Africa? Nseko, founder of Airspace Africa, joins us live for more. A very, very good morning to you, Derek, joining us from Port Elizabeth in South Africa. I do hope you're well, and a happy new year to you. What kind of year was 2021 for the aviation sector? Just give us an overview.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, very interesting times for aviation. We've been about 18 months into this pandemic now. Well, it is actually coming to 2 years. And it's not even a month since countries across the world were banning travel from South African countries. So the pandemic very much endures, and we are still dealing with the very worst of it, which is very unfortunate and scary going into 2022. Talking about 2021, IATA projected that the aviation industry would lose about $52 billion generally across the world. Now, the aviation industry lost about $138 billion in 2020. So that suggests that 2021 has been slightly better. But according to the African Airlines Association, African aviation is losing about $8.5 billion in revenue compared to the $10.5 billion from 2020. 2021 has not been very different from 2020. We've seen the same reactionary and draconian measures from our governments to the various variants that have come around as regards to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the aviation industry is still struggling, as well as associated industries such as tourism. We're going into 2022 with cautious optimism, and we're hoping that governments will learn from the lessons of 2021. They didn't from the lessons of 2020, but aviation bodies have been very vocal about this, asking governments and letting governments know that these restrictions are really not a solution to the spread of COVID-19, and that they instead are destroying livelihoods and affecting our economies going forward. So 2021 was not a good year at all for the aviation industry, but it's definitely been a little bit of a step up from 2020. One of the major things that came out of 2021 with regards to the aviation industry is that our cargo market actually grew by about 33%. So that is something for African aviation to celebrate with regards to the aviation industry. Generally across the globe, the air cargo sector has grown, but specifically in Africa where it's grown significantly. So that is an area for African airlines to perhaps focus on, and to perhaps even extract those crucial revenues that they need going into 2022 as we continue to suffer.
Indeed, as you've mentioned there, cargo has been a saving grace for the aviation industry. What about domestic travel? Do you think, looking at the numbers, it could also be another area to help the recovery of the sector?
Yeah, the domestic markets generally across the world, as we've seen, the countries across the world with huge and thriving domestic markets have been the ones that have had the easier way out of this crisis. And that's not to say that we're out of the aviation crisis. Globally, we're still down by almost half in terms of air traffic. So the situation is still very dire. But global markets like China and the United States that are very strong domestically have bounced back a little bit earlier. In Africa, markets such as South Africa and Morocco and Nigeria that are strong on a domestic perspective have had a better recovery from the crisis, and they continue to fare better than the countries that do not have strong domestic markets. So that is the one area, obviously, because domestic markets are not facing the brunt of the travel restrictions. And also, we are very lucky as well. And going into 2022, perhaps this is one of the trends that we've perhaps let go of the lockdowns, and now we simply have to deal with cross-border restrictions. So the lockdowns are gone. They're in the days gone by, and that is definitely helping the domestic markets, and domestic travel sector is the one that is helping the general aviation industry across the world.
Derek, we also saw partnerships characterize 2021, case in point, KQ and SAA. We also saw Rwanda and the Qatar code share agreement. Is this the way to go moving forward?
Well, partnerships have been the way to go for a very long time, not just in the present and moving forward. In the past, there is significant evidence to suggest that working together and even on a more advanced scale, some form of integration is extremely important for markets to thrive. We look at the strongest markets in the world, Europe and the United States. They only have about 4 or 5 strong carriers or on those continents. So it's important for the African aviation industry as well to come together, and we need to create airlines of scale. We need to create gigantic airlines that are more stable and that are more resilient, especially in such times. We're definitely going to have future tremors as well in the industry, and this crisis continues to be an existential crisis for African airlines, and most of them are very small. That's why they are struggling. We're looking at Ethiopian Airlines. It's the only airline in Africa that has, well, it's not the only one, but it's one of a few that have managed in this crisis, and to some extent have even managed to make money. So that is down as well to the size. But cooperation, our destinies in Africa are intertwined, and we need to understand that if we compete against each other, it is to our detriment. We are fighting for a small pie, and we need to work together in order for our industry to thrive. So my hope is that going into 2022, this trend of partnerships continues as it was in 2021. It was good to see that we had quite a number of partnerships come up on the African continent. And by the way, we're still lagging behind when it comes to cooperation on a bilateral and multilateral level with the world. I think last I checked, on average, African airlines have about an average of about 8 code shares and interlines. And on an international scale, international airlines have over 60 code share agreements. So yes. We are lagging behind in terms of cooperation on the African continent.